Hello, my name is Samantha Thomas, and today I'm going to talk to you about one of my personal hobbies, which is home canning. This is a hobby I got into sometime in 2018, and I've been experimenting with various recipes, some that were great from the USDA, others that were not so good, and frankly, I had to throw out some moldy product or food items that I tried to preserve and it just didn't quite work out. And the two recipes I had the most success with have been cranberry sauce and applesauce. You can also do jams, jellies, any other sauce, and pretty much any other kind of food item you want. But the type of canner you want to use is going to affect what foods you can safely preserve and which ones you can't. And I'm going to try to go over that all with you briefly today. So, what is home canning? Home canning is a process you can use to use boiling water or a pressure canner in order to preserve your food so it's shelf stable. So you can put it on a shelf, you don't have to worry about freezing it or putting it in the refrigerator. If something goes wrong when you're home canning, you either have to throw your food product out, recan it, or you can put it in the refrigerator or the freezer at your discretion, depending on what the situation is. But generally speaking, because of the safety issues related to home canning, my recommendation as a novice is that anybody starting out with home canning, stick with canning using a water bath canner, only do things like jams, jellies, sauces, or fruits and berries, and any sort of food item that is more acidic than tomatoes. Tomatoes are the least acidic food you can safely process in a water bath canner. So what are the tools that you need for home canning? First off, you're going to need jars, lids, and rings. You can usually use mason jars and they work just great. You need a water bath canner or a stock pot as your base for boiling water and boiling your jars to preserve them. And if you do a low acid food, you're going to need a pressure canner. But overall, in most cases, I would be recommending stick with the water bath canner or the stock pot. Some other things that you're going to need are a jar lifting tool or grabber. That way you're not touching the jars directly. You can use tongs as well, but the jar grabbing tool is usually a lot better. That's right here. You also want a jar rack for the bottom of your canner. A bubble removing tool. You can use a spatula. That works just fine. And the other thing you're going to want is a specialty jar funnel that fits over the top of your jar, and it lets you just spoon your food product right into the jar that's hot, and it prevents messes and spills. Some things you want to consider. First off, home canners are very concerned with safety, and we want to prevent botulism. Botulism, unfortunately, is a deadly form of food poisoning that can paralyze your lungs. And the easiest way to prevent botulism is to follow the recipe to the T that you're using for home canning. You shouldn't really go with experimenting outside of safe recipes until you're really familiar with home canning. And at that point, you're actually going to need to go have a lab analyze a sample of your food product. But for a basic home canner, all you need to do is make sure you're following the recipe to the T, making sure you make note of elevation or how high you are above sea level, because every so many thousand feet, you need to add a couple minutes to your processing time that's listed on the recipe. This is something you figure out on a case-by-case basis, and you can use some of the resources I've included in this presentation to give you some guidelines for what you can use for safety reasons. From there, the other thing I would recommend doing, add lemon juice or citric acid to your food because that lowers the pH or makes it more acidic and it makes it more shelf stable. And always make sure you're using new lids. Rings need to be clean and free of rust. You can reuse jars, but they have to be free of chips, cracks, scratches, etc. New supplies is always best. This actually was an issue for me during the pandemic because there was a canning supply shortage. So I ended up freezing some stuff I normally wouldn't have ended up freezing. But if you have access to new supplies, go for it. Otherwise, just make sure you check your supplies before you use them. And what is the basic process to home canning? First off, you want to clean and sterilize your kitchen, the surfaces you're going to be using, countertop, sink, stovetop, with a simple bleach solution. Plenty of people probably did this during the pandemic as well for cleaning, just a little bit of bleach and water, clean everything, let the smell evaporate. And from there, you could start making your food product. Make your food product based on the recipe, keep it in a hot pot on the stovetop, and just keep it hot. From there, on another burner, you set up your water bath canner. I'm going with describing the water bath process. You set up your other canner on another burner. You put the water, the jars, the rack, etc. in your pot. You bring everything to a boil and you sterilize it for about 10 minutes. Once your jars have been sterilized in boiling water for 10 minutes, that means they're safe to be lifted individually out of the pot with your jar grabbing tool. You dump the water, you put the jar down, put the funnel on it, and from there you start spooning the food product into your jar. Clean it, set a ring on it, make sure it's stuck down nice and tight. Then you can lift the jar back into the pot, and from there, once you have all your full jars inside the canner, you process it for the appropriate amount of time based on the recipe and elevation. Generally, in most cases, you're going to get multiple jars of food that you can put on the shelf. And when you're done with boiling or processing your food, you take your hot jars out, you put them on the countertop, you let them cool for 12 to 24 hours. At that point, you can check the jars to see if the seal is tight using a spoon or another tapping method to make sure that your jars are well sealed. If you confirm they're sealed, you can put them on the shelf. If there's a problem, you can reprocess everything or use it immediately, put it in the fridge, freeze it. There's always options for that. Okay? If you have any other questions, I'm willing to answer them at a later time. I can make this presentation accessible to you, and I hope you have a great day.